Day 54 to 12:25 p.m. Industrial Area, South District, Bay City Settlement, Parañaque City, Philippines. Miasma blew like waves rippling on the ground in a large circle. In the center of that ripple, Mark's unsteady body stood, twitching and growling. Both Garvlam and Shin had to retreat because of the miasma. Especially Shin, since he had a weaker body than the flame demon. The dread he felt from the pressure emitted by Mark was too heavy. "You bastard," the gigantic flame demon growled. "You should just lie down if you were dead already." Garvlam shouted as he controlled the floating skulls in the air to attack. Immediately, hundreds of balls of fire were launched towards Mark, who was just staring at the two without moving. As the attack came, Mark hunched low with his arms dangling down. The blade of flame that was still on his right hand hit the ground, causing a metallic sound. Mark then raised his head, looking at the balls of fire approaching. When the first volley approached, burst, 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 burst. The balls of fire burst apart. A volley after another, the balls of fire came in droves, covering the area with bright light as they exploded. Mark was enveloped by hundreds of basketball-sized explosions. It might already have been 1,000 or more when the rain of fire stopped. With that amount, the enemy should be dead already. Or not, to both Shin's and Garvlam's surprise, the pressure they could feel never lessened and the rippling miasma never vanished. When the smoke from the explosions was gone, they saw Mark unharmed from the new attacks. Mark stared at the two with his glowing eyes and his head lilted to the right. His hunched posture was still the same. However, 6 red tentacles could be seen swaying behind his back. On the end of each tentacle was a reddish-black colored blade. Ruah. He released an inhumane roar from his throat. That could just be a simple roar on the outside, but Shin immediately fell on one knee as he felt his head ache badly. Shin felt a wet sensation on his nose and ears. As he touched it, he saw that his ears and nose were actually bleeding. He finally noticed Mark was staring at them with his eyes fully red. *T. It's that strange energy again. The swordsman realized. He was too focused on the heavy feeling he had and failed to notice the very same energy that covered the large area from before. Tisk. Garvlam clicked his tongue and spoke to Shin. "Kid, I appreciate your assistance, but retreat now. If you can prepare our escape, then do it. That bastard is just standing there not because he can't move. He's preparing for something." Garvlam already realized. The enemy might have turned into a soulless one, but it did not make the situation any better. Instead, it became more dangerous. Burst. Burst. As the flame demon finished his sentence, 2 more tentacles emerged from Mark's back. However, unlike the first 6, the 2 new tentacles started to envelop his body. From his shoulders, the gelatinous blood spread to his arms and torso. Then it spread to his back, wrists, legs, face and the already torn wings. Even Flam was engulfed by the blood. Still hunched, he looked like a figure totally covered in blood. The blood then wriggled as it started to take shape and hardened, making a hideous-looking armor filled with thorns and blades. Even the tentacles on his back changed into jointed limbs similar to a spider's or a beetle's, which was filled with thorns. Flam was changed from a flamberge into a reddish-black wide sword with spikes instead of a blade. Mark's face was covered with a mask that only covered the upper parts, leaving his mouth and chin open. Clink. 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 Metallic sounds could be heard as the 6 new limbs landed on the ground. The transformation only lasted for several seconds. Mark then raised his head, glaring at the two, and then, poof! Garvlam hurriedly used the wide side of his sword as shield and put the sword in front of Shin. It was because Mark suddenly disappeared from his initial position. Bam! The large sword was shaken heavily as Mark appeared in front of the sword with his metal limbs hitting it. From the loud sound, it was obvious that the impact was too strong, that the sword held by the flame demon shook fiercely. Tisk. "This bastard aiming at you, kid. Retreat now." Garvlam shouted as Mark jumped away, kicking the blade of the sword. Mark then landed on a pile of debris, but before the two could blink, Mark vanished once more. Normally, a trail of black mist could be seen. But as Mark appeared and disappeared now, it was not just a trail of mist but a thick wave of miasma bursting into the surroundings. It totally masked Mark's true movements, making his attack very hard to predict. VOOM. Another burst of miasma scattered as Mark appeared behind Shin. Bam! Garvlam blocked the attack once more. On the other hand, Shin took the opportunity to counter-attack before he retreated. He unleashed several slashes at Mark with his katana. Clang! 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 All the slashes from the katana was blocked by one of the metal limbs. Seeing his attack blocked, Shin jumped back and started to retreat. As he retreated, however, a wall of miasma appeared blocking his path. Still, it was not enough to stop him. Shin slashed the wall of miasma, creating a large gap for him to go through. That slash contained his ability, and rather than slashing the wall into two, it looked more like the miasma that his sword passed through was erased instead. With that gap, Shin used his inhuman speed and ran away. As the primary target ran away, Mark tried to make chase, but he was blocked by the flame demon from following. When Shin was already out of sight, Garvlam smiled. I can't use my puppets or attack if that kid is around me, but with the restraint gone. Garvlam hacked his sword towards Mark, creating another large tremor as the sword hit the ground. However, Mark was still safe and sound. He did not even turn into mist but just propelled himself away using the metal limbs. Slash! Slash! The flame demon unleashed slash after slash, causing dust and debris to fly around. However, Mark moved around like a jumping spider, evading all the attacks with erratic movements. From time to time, he would also charge forwards, attacking Garvlam's body with either a smash with the sword on his hand or by piercing with his metal limbs. Mark also tried to give the flame demon a large bite but was not able to do so as the flame demon tried to counter-attack. The two fought like there was no tomorrow. Unlike before where Mark just flew around dodging everything, the current Mark was attacking fiercely without holding back. Due to the difference in speed, attack after attack from Mark connected on the flame demon's body. If not for Garvlam's enhanced body, wounds would have already covered it. Still, there were scratches and holes left on his body as Mark attacked. Bam! Mark was finally hit and his body flew towards a huge pile of debris quite a distance away. Garvlam used a feint and slashed down on Mark when he was actually going to use the wide part of the blade to slap the latter away like a fly. The attack was successful, however. From the debris, Mark sprung up like nothing happened. However, something changed. The red glow on his eyes became violet steadily. Seeing that, Garvlam surrounded Mark with the floating skulls and shot a barrage of balls of fire. However, the balls of fire were being blocked by the metal limbs that moved on inhuman speed. Some of the fireballs hit Mark as they were too many, causing him to sway around unsteadily and even fall. Still, he would sprung up like nothing happened. While all those were happening, Mark was staring at Garvlam with a ferocious stare. Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr time, black balls of miasma emerged from the ripples. The balls of miasma then shot towards each of the floating skulls. Garvlam made the skulls evade and counter-attack with balls of fire, but the balls of miasma chased persistently while dodging the balls of fire. Then, a skull was caught and the miasma covered the skull entirely. The flames were not extinguished, but the control the flame demon had on the skull was cut off as it fell onto the ground. While the balls of miasma and the remaining skulls did a chase in the sky, Mark charged forwards, piercing his metal limbs towards the unguarded head of the flame demon. ***. This is wild, Flam commented on the scene he could see on the monitor. Unlike before where Mark was playing a war of attrition, his body was behaving the opposite. It was only dedicated on attacking without even minding if he was hit or was hurt. Yep, my body even tried to bite, but mutators don't carry the unstable strain of mutagen, so it should be unnecessary. Mark complained. By the way, do you recognize the other guy? Well, I'm not sure. Flam scratched his head. If I'm correct, that guy is called Shin. He belongs to a group in the outer division of the organization. His ability is to erase energies, right? I didn't expect that the holder of Agrid's ability to assist Garvlam. I also feel Morelful nearby. To think that the inheritors of those two are members of Ouroboros. There could be more. Mark spoke in a low voice and a sigh. Who? What? Flam asked in confusion. No, don't mind me. Mark shook Flam's questions away. Agrid, one of Freed's royal knights. He was about 10 years older than Freed and was initially the personal knight of Freed's father. When Psypathogen invaded Arielis, he was bitten during the time the castle was invaded. He managed to survive the infection and became a psychic that had the ability to erase any kind of energy in a certain radius around him at will. However, instead of using his ability like mages, he preferred to pair it with his swordsmanship. It seemed that the habit was also inherited by Shin. On the other hand, Morelful was a retainer of Freed's former fiancée. She was a bodyguard and an expert in using laser sniper rifles. As a psychic, she gained the ability to open portals and travel through them. However, it was not omnipotent as the mental energy required to open a portal varied heavily and opening the portals needed to follow quite a number of rules. Mark never expected that two of the reinforcements of the enemy were inheritors. When he saw Shin, Mark wanted to cancel the release, but as the song was still ongoing, there was no way to take control of his body. He needed to wait until the song was stopped. Even if the hypnotism was still in effect at that time, it would be weaker and he would be able to break it. Now, he could only patiently wait. Once the song was stopped, he would immediately take control of his body and deal with the enemies. He had a promise to fulfill after all. Asterisk asterisk asterisk, the sounds of intense battle echoed over the distance. Spera carefully traversed the area searching for Dop. At the short pause of the battle earlier, Shin asked the flame demon if Dop was still alive, which the demon affirmed. However, since the flame demon was deranged at that time, he could only direct Shin to the general direction. Now, Spera was running towards that direction. Carefully running around large debris and jumping over obstacles, she finally reached the area where the ritual that resurrected Garvlam happened before. There, she saw the barely intact aircraft Dop and his team used to come here. Scouring the area, he finally found Dop and Emmett that were both severely injured and unconscious. She immediately pressed the device on her ear. Shin. I found Dop and one of his subordinates. No one else is alive. What are we going to do next? Day 54 to 12:37 p.m. Industrial Area, South District, Bay City Settlement, Parañaque City, Metro Manila. After retreating from the fight, Shin was running towards the direction where Dop was last seen by Garvlam. Still, while he was running, could not help but look back several times. He could not fathom what happened to the enemy. A being who could contend with the flame demon could not have died easily. However, not having a will or consciousness could only say otherwise. Not only was that, but the enemy seemed to have turned into a powerful mutated infected, an existence even more dangerous than before. It was not new information in the organization. A mutator that died with his head and body intact would turn into a mutated infected. The worst thing about this was that the infected the mutator turned into would not only be stronger but could perfectly utilize the mutator's abilities. The worst thing about this was people with special abilities that turned into an infected could also use those special abilities after turning. The current enemy was in both instances, which surely became a huge threat to him and the flame demon that was already weakened due to the battle. About the strange feeling he had towards the enemy, he decided to ignore it. Although he was also curious about this weird feeling, his life was more precious. Shin. I found Dop and one of his subordinates. No one else is alive. What are we going to do next? The monotone voice of Spera was heard on his device, which gave him a sense of relief in this dire situation. The pressure he felt back then when he was attacked by the enemy was overwhelming even for an experienced fighter like him. If not for the generous payment they would receive and the possible reward from the Master of Volcanic Flames, They would have left this place immediately just by the sight of Mark overpowering Garvlam, who was a false deity. Shin immediately pressed his communication device on his ear. Spera, fire a flare for us to know your location. Yoko, Tsukiko. Regroup at Spera's location. Also stop the song. It's not effective on the infected at all. Don't waste your energies anymore. Almost immediately after Shin spoke, the song that echoed across the industrial area stopped. On the other hand, a bright ball of light was launched into the air marking Spera's current location. Spera stared at the flare launched at the sky. She noticed that Dop was waking up, probably because of the light that came from the flare above them. Dop opened his eyes and saw Spera's small emotionless face staring at him without even a shred of sympathy to his broken arms and legs. He was already out of their hooded robe, revealing his rather good-looking face. Unfortunately, he was all covered in bruises, wounds and dirt. The white-colored clothes were all dirty and was already turned into black and gray. What took you all guys too long? I'm going to pay a large amount, you right? My injuries are too painful that I passed out already while waiting. The supposed severely injured Dop spoke. It was in a manner that anyone would question if he was injured or not. Spera, however, did not pay any mind on what he had just said and asked. It's good that you're awake. Just how long are you going to maintain that state? You will pay us to open a path for you to retreat and not to carry you and your subordinate. Ha, seriously. Dop sighed. Where is that monster? Bam. 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 Hear that? That big guy there is still fighting the enemy. Shin said that he already turned into an infected and it's a very powerful one. It's better if we leave already. The big guy will not hold out too long. I'm really surprised you can sleep in a place like this and will all the noise. Spera replied. However, it was noticeable how she hesitated in calling the current opponent of Garvlam an enemy. As Spera finished speaking, Shin arrived beside her. He reached the place fast, but Spera was not surprised. Seeing Shin, Dop smiled. Finally, I can get out of this pain. It's killing me. Dop said as his body disintegrated, turning into dust. It included his clothes and other things he wore. At the same time and at the same rate his body crumbled into dust. However, a silhouette of a person standing behind his body slowly emerged. The moment his body fully turned to dust and vanished, the silhouette finished materializing, revealing another Dop who had no injuries on his body. His white clothes were unstained and his other belongings were all recovered. He was even wearing his gray-colored robe once again. Damn, that is painful. Dop complained as he checked his body for anything wrong but made a satisfied nod soon after. Shin and Spera ignored Dop, who was now checking Emmett's injuries. Spera, prepare the portal. We'll go when Yoko and Tsukiko arrived. Okay. At Shin's command, Spera closed her eyes, concentrating heavily on using her ability. Soon, the space in front of her started to distort and a small hole appeared soon after, which started to expand. The speed, however, was rather slow. Not only that they were in surroundings affected with miasma, but the distance where the other side of the portal was opening was rather far. She was also already drained from using a long-distance portal earlier, making it harder to construct another one. Bam. Boom. The battle between Garvlam and Mark continued and was rather going intense. However, the battle was tilting against the flame demon as the infected nature of Mark started to adapt further and further. From jumping around like a jumping spider using his metallic limbs, Mark was not appearing and disappearing consecutively while releasing a large amount of miasma in the surroundings. Aside from his speed, Mark was growing stronger. His jumps and kicks that could barely do anything before was now cracking the pavement and was already damaging the flame demon's enhanced body. Garvlam's attacks could not hit Mark anymore and all his floating skulls were taken down already. Poof! Bam! Mark appeared behind Garvlam and gave the flame demon a kick with his 2 legs and 6 metal limbs. The flame demon was pushed 2 steps forwards and staggered before falling onto one knee. That kick Mark unleashed not only pushed the demon away but also caused cracks on his body. Damn it! Garvlam bellowed as he swung his sword, making Mark jump back. At this time, the song had already stopped and Garvlam knew that the time to retreat was coming. Finally, he could feel a distortion in space as a portal was being opened by Spera quite a distance away. However, Mark also felt it. Master, aren't you going to take over already? Flam asked as the song had already stopped. However, the infected behavior of Mark's body continued as he was still affected by the hypnotism and Mark had not competed for the control yet. Not yet. Mark said calmly. Ouroboros is filled with strange creatures and psychic ability holders, right? Yes. Then, you should know that the infected is highly attracted to psychic abilities, especially when they are being used. Hearing that, Flam became wide-eyed. Just a few seconds after the ripple in space was felt, Mark's body turned its head away, facing toward the south. See? They will think that I'm attracted to the appearance of the portal and will try to block me. That is when I will take them by surprise. Still, I'm surprised that that bastard seemed to be fine. Mark narrowed his eyes in annoyance as he felt Dop had recovered. Are you talking about Dop? Flam spoke. That dandy guy is a doppelganger. He can create another copy of him, turning that into a real body after erasing the previous one. He can also change the appearance of himself and other people he was able to manipulate. The copies he can make using other people's bodies can be used as puppets connected to several people, like how the speech was done before. The existence of Dop being revealed like this surprised Mark a bit. It seemed that Flam really wanted to turn over to his side and leave the organization. Still, it also surprised him that Dop was actually a creature like that. So, it's like that. Mark smiled. However, since Dop's ability was of his existence and not a psychic ability, he felt pity that he would surely not be able to steal it. Seeing Mark distracted, Garvlam hacked his sword down ferociously. Unfortunately, Mark dodged. The flame demon hurriedly tried to defend himself as that attack created an opening to attack him, but to his dismay, Mark vanished into black mist and smoke which left the area of battle like a speeding race car. Not good. Garvlam was wide-eyed. As he had just been reborn, he never knew that Mark would be attracted to the ripples of psychic energy and was not prepared to intercept Mark. Kid. The enemy is coming. Garvlam shouted loudly, which echoed across the industrial area. His body was too large and slow to catch up to Mark, who was getting faster and faster as he fought. It did not take long and the black smoke was already speeding towards Spera. Shin hurried to intercept Mark and slashed the mist, erasing the movement ability and forced Mark to appear. However, Mark's speed during the movement did not decrease after he was forced out and ended up ramming Shin. The swordsman used his sword to block and was forced back several meters. Puff. Being hit by a speeding race car was too much even for the inhuman-bodied Shin. As his organs were rattled heavily by the impact he had just received, blood spurted from his mouth. However, he remained standing and did not fall down. Behind him were not just Spera but also Yoko and Tsukiko. He could not back down and let his members get killed. Stomp. Stomp. Garvlam's loud footsteps could be heard from behind as the flame demon tried to catch up. But then, something unexpected happened. Mark, who was charging forwards, stopped and stood in place, a very unusual thing for an infected to do. It was when Mark raised his head and looked at Shin and Spera that they noticed the anomaly. Would you all kindly surrender? Mark spoke, which turned everyone's eyes wide except for Spera, who was concentrating on the portal. An infected gaining his consciousness back was unprecedented. For it to happen abruptly like this made them feel like all of this had been staged. Yoko. Tsukiko. Shin shouted, prompting the two to sing. However, Ga. The two women fell on their knees holding their heads. Mark stared at the two with his eyes glowing bright red. Unfortunately, I can't let you two do that again. T. They were pinned down. Even Dop, who thought that his safety was secured, became worried. As the portal was almost open, they just needed to make a distraction. It was then that, Brats. Close your eyes. The voice of Garvlam shouting could be heard. Shinning GG. Bright light enveloped the area, which severely affected Mark, whose eyes had been accustomed to the dark surroundings. He was blinded. The only thing he knew that the presences of people around was moving rapidly as they retreated. Knowing their plan, Mark waved his hands despite not being able to see. Miasma surged unto the surroundings, which engulfed a large area around him. Soon, the surroundings became quiet. By the time his eyes recovered, the portal was already gone along with the people in front. Mark turned his head behind and saw a 4-meter-tall statue left in the middle of the industrial area. He did not expect that Garvlam would leave his newly created body and explode a part of his spirit in order to escape. The flame demon succeeded, well, almost. Mark walked forward. Several steps later, he was standing beside an unconscious girl wearing a black cloak. Well, this is Morelful's inheritor, right? It's a pity Agrid escaped. That 2 singing girls are interesting too. I wanted to capture all of them, including that doppelganger. I want to know if there is a way to take their racial abilities. Well, I'll surely encounter again them sooner or later, he said as he poked Spera's arms with his right shoe. After checking that she was out cold, Mark stared at the space where the portal should have been before. I wonder if they will like the souvenirs. Day 54 to 1:45 p.m., Japan. A hole appeared in the middle of an expressway and expanded over the span of seconds. Before the outbreak, sudden phenomenon like this in the middle of a busy road would cause accidents. Now, however, there were only infected around that could witness the disturbance. The hole appeared like a disturbance in space than an actual portal. Then, a bright ball of light suddenly flew out of the hole, followed by a sudden burst of black smoke that covered about 4 meters around the hole before disappearing. After running away from the black smoke, the ball of light burst out a blinding light before 5 figures emerged on the middle of the almost empty road. Unsteadily, 4 of the figures stood up, taking a look at the hole they escaped from as it vanished like it never appeared. On the other hand, one of the figures that had no arm remained lying on the ground unconscious. That was then that they noticed, "This is not our base. Spera, what happened?" Shin bellowed in his usual scolding tone. However, when he looked around, Spera. "Kid, don't bother looking." A ball of fire that looked like boiling lava flew down to the level of his face and spoke. "If you are looking for that small girl, she's left back there." Everyone was surprised seeing the talking ball of fire, but the voice immediately let them know who it was. "Your arc is?" Shin spoke in a question. "What did your arc is mean?" "Spera is. You should just be glad already." Garvlam spoke in an annoyed tone. "I forced all of us into an incomplete portal because that small girl had already fallen unconscious. I saw the miasma cover her, so I was not able to retrieve her like you brats here. If I spent more time to get her, don't even mention speaking and standing here. All of you will be in the hands of that monster." Hearing those words, Shin's fist tightened to the point of his palm bleeding. Yoko felt crestfallen as Spera was left behind. As for Tsukiko, she looked like the usual, although her eyes had a tint of worry. "Just what is that guy?" Yoko spoke. "Shin, you said that he turned into an infected, right? Why can he speak?" That question echoed inside their minds. Shin looked at Garvlam, who was the person who noticed the change at first. "Kid, don't look at me like that. That monster returned from being a soulless one back to his previous state after the song stopped. I even had no choice to leave my newly created body there to enable all of us here to escape." The tone of Garvlam was grave. After many tries and sacrificing thousands of human lives, he was finally resurrected. Just to fight a monster like that and escape in his weakened spirit form. With his current state, who knows how long he had to spend to recuperate his spirit and create another physical body. The setback he gained from this defeat was overwhelming. "Dop, we lost a lot in this request of yours. You better give us a raise." Shin turned to Dop, who was not speaking since earlier, but when all of them turned to the latter for his reply, their eyes widened. Dop was not speaking, not because he was just keeping silence, but his body kept on the state of destruction and creation. For some reason, Dop was trying to recreate another body, but before he was able to, The new body disperses and the body he was trying to replace was getting reconstructed instead. Curse that bastard. All of you get away from him. Garvlam bellowed in unprecedented panic. However, he was late. Boom, Dop, wide-eyed, exploded. Black smoke burst forth from his body, enveloping area about 5 meters around him. Shin's group was within that area as they were standing together with Dop. At the last moment, however, Garvlam burned another part of his spirit and created a thin film of light around Shin, Yoko and Tsukiko. The three managed to run out of the area covered in smoke. However, there were parts of their bodies touched by the smoke which immediately festered. Fortunately, the protection Garvlam gave then stopped the contamination in their skin from spreading. Thank you, your Archiz. Shin immediately conveyed his gratitude while enduring the pain in the injury he received. In exchange for burning his spirit once more, Garvlam became smaller. The burden in his spirit became larger, but he would not let these three die. Not only that they assisted him in fighting, but these three was the only way for him to reach the base of the organization in this country. Shin, Yoko and Tsukiko inspected their hands and feet. The cloak that covered their bodies protected them, but their hands and feet was not covered and was hit by the miasma. Now, their hands and feet looked unsightly, and for sure, it would be hard to heal these injuries. Still, they were alive. Both Dop and Emmett were no more. Damn it. We lost Spera, we are injured, and Dop is gone. How are we going to get paid for this? Shin bellowed in anger. At the side, Yoko and Tsukiko stepped away from Shin as if afraid that he would turn his anger towards them. We should leave this place first. The soulless ones are already gathering. Garvlam suggested, which the three nodded to. Where are we anyway? Yoko asked, which Tsukiko responded by pointing her finger at a certain sign beside the road. Nagasaki Expressway. What? We need to travel almost the whole country to get to our base. How are we going to do this without Spera? Yoko started to throw a tantrum just to get a smack on her head. Stop shouting, we need to leave. There's no point in crying over spilt milk. Day 54 to 12:45 p.m. Industrial Area, South District, Bay City Settlement, Parañaque City, Metro Manila, Philippines. This armor looks hideous. Mark complained while touching the spikes protruded on the armor he was now wearing. Not only that his body was covered in this unsightly armor, but the armor he previously wore was not fused with this one due to having the same kind of material used to create the armors. Now, he needed to make another. While shrugging his shoulders, the metal limbs on his back started to slowly liquefy as he tried to return the blood metal, covering his body back to liquid state and return the blood inside his body. As the amount of blood used to create the armor and the metal limbs was rather large, he was kind of feeling lethargic. He looked around, fire still raged everywhere. Since this was a bad thing, he took out the Stormcaller mental crystal and activated it. Drip. Drip. The swirling clouds started to pour heavy rain, just inside the industrial area. It was quite a sight. Mark faced the sky, eyes closed as he embraced the refreshing feeling as the cold rainwater fell on his face. He was kind of tired already, he needed some refresher. He then approached the unconscious Spera. To say, he was quite interested in this girl. She was giving the same vibe he and May both had. He wanted to know the details about it when she woke up. However, there was a thing needed to be done first. Mark removed Spera's hood, revealing her rather cute face that was being splashed by the drops of rain. By her looks, she seemed to be of Russian descent, unlike her teammates that were all Japanese. He then pressed his right hand on her forehead. The Psi crystal on his arm glowed brightly, which even seeped out of his hideous armor. By the time he removed his hand, a crystal was already held by him. It was a mental crystal, with a black swirling orb inside with bits of lightning in it. The orb was a symbol of space, black, bottomless and unstably chaotic. With a flick of his hand, the crystal vanished as it entered the Psi crystal for safekeeping. Now, there was no way for Spera to escape, and he would be able to question her about many things. Still, Mark did not expect that Spera, that was lacking emotions, would not be able to handle his empathic ability. The other two women only screamed in pain, but she directly fainted. Well, it is a good thing anyway. Mark waited until the spikes on his hands and arms were melted before he picked Spera up on his arms and walked towards the exit of the industrial area. On the way, he stopped by the area where the jib of the crane had fallen. He had purposely led the fight away from this area because of one reason. It's good that they held out. Mark put Spera down and started waving flam against a large portion of the wall of the fallen building. The wall crumbled, revealing several soldiers that were trapped under the jib. They luckily survived because the jib served as the shelter above, blocking the fallen buildings and created a safe area under the debris. Seeing that the wall crumbled, sounds of joy could be heard from the conscious soldiers. They had been trying to find a way to go out but were not able to, and the tremors that they felt only bolstered their anxiety further. When they saw Mark, however, they became cautious. "Don't worry and just get out. The fight ended already." Without saying anything further, Mark picked Spera up once more and left. The soldiers went out and shielded their eyes from the rain. Some walked out while carrying their unconscious comrades. They finally saw the destruction that was created by this battle. They could not help but feel glad that they were still alive. After leaving the soldiers, Mark went to the only building left intact in the industrial area. It was the building where the senator and Devon were left before. With a puff of black mist, Mark appeared inside the same room where he retrieved Ophelia. The senator was still alive but was in a very bad condition. On the other hand, Devon had already passed away. His face was warped in agony. His death was surely painful. Mark then let out an empty, mental crystal, and let it flew above Devon's head. With a bright glow in the room, the crystal turned from being empty to having a glass-like orb inside. This will come in handy. Mark smiled at this harvest before turning at the unconscious senator with his expression turning grave. The unconscious senator was still in the position like how he was left before, sitting on the ground while leaning on the wall. "I would not mind if you led the settlement. With your ambition, you could have pushed our country further if you really became a president. Unfortunately." Mark stomped on the man's head. "Bam! You picked the wrong people to mess with. You're lucky you're asleep." Carrying Spera out, Mark left the senator, whose head turned into a mush of unrecognizable flesh and bones. Just the way he died could make anyone feel the anger of the killer that did it. Even the wall behind the head of the senator was dented by the impact. Soon Mark stepped out of the industrial area with his armor finally gone, leaving his tattered clothes behind. As he walked out, the miasma around the area could be seen flying into his body as if being sucked by a wormhole. In a few seconds, the dark wall of miasma surrounding the industrial area had already vanished into his body. Mark smiled. Outside the gates, everyone was waiting for him. He was not surprised that May and the children along with Edsel and Colleen were here, but for some reason, Odalina was also here along with the friends he searched for in Bakor. Many of them had tears on their faces seeing the familiar face of Mark. "Papa." The three little girls ran towards him and hugged him, ignoring how weak he was. Without a choice, he could only put Spera on the ground and hug the three girls. Then, another person approached, making him raise his head. With a smile, "I'm back. Gerger, welcome back. Day 55 to 9:22 a.m. Southeast Tower, Military Residences, North District, Bay City Settlement, Pasay City, Metro Manila." A new dawn had come several hours ago, marking the start of the new day after the battle in the industrial area was concluded. At the industrial area, people were in droves working to recover anything they could and clean up the debris scattered all around. The battle yesterday caused a huge loss for the settlement, but thinking positively, this loss was better than being conquered by another force that was totally unfamiliar to the people here. If they had succeeded, who would have known what would happen in the future? The friends and the relatives of those that were abducted by the organization also came to the area to look. However, not to mention seeing their dead bodies. Not even a hem of their clothes were found after the flame demon burned their bodies to ash and used their skulls as puppets. All they found were hundreds of scorched skulls rolling on the ground, but who would know which skull belonged to whom? And thus, These people could only mourn while holding onto their prayers, wishing that their loved ones would watch over them from the heavens. Mark was watching that scene through the window of the room on the highest floor of the hotel he was allowed to stay. Yesterday was a tiring day for everyone, especially him. Not only that he fought against a false deity, but his body had gone another enhancement due to the stimulation of mutagen in his body during the battle. I still have to get used to this, Mark said as he shook his wrist. The black marks on his body that appeared after he devoured the deity of bloodshed had changed and became a bit larger. Gurgur, is something wrong with your hand? May, who was holding a cup of coffee to give to Mark, asked from behind. No, it's fine. I'm just not used to this, it doesn't look bad, May said while looking at Mark's wrist as he took the cup of coffee from her. Mark shrugged his shoulders and looked out of the window once more while he took a sip on his coffee. After the battle yesterday, the next events overwhelmed him. When his friends got the chance, they crowded him in glee for his return. Some shed tears while others shouted in joy. Since Mark was separated from them almost 2 months ago, the chance of him returning was rather slim in their view. After all, it was the end of the world where even their closest loved one could die tomorrow or the next day. Yet, he returned and even became someone powerful. Apparently, they came after they received the news that May returned. Many people saw May enter the gates and when she and the others were escorted by the military. When they arrived to see May, they saw the rest of the battle inside the industrial area. Unfortunately, Mark was not used to that kind of welcome. If not for May and the children being there, he would have escaped immediately. After the crowd had calmed down, it was the time he was greeted by the officers of the military. The introduction of the general and his talk with them was rather short since both parties were not in the mood to do a long talk. Mark was tired and the military had to deal with the aftermath, making them agree to schedule a formal meeting some other time. At that time, he made sure that the military would collect the body of Garvlam for him and not tinker with it, which the general agreed readily. He also took claim for the hooded robes that the members of the organization wore since he had uses for those garments. With everyone, they returned to the residence and he was given this room, which was one of the most luxurious suites in the hotel. Of course, May, Abigail and Iola immediately joined him in the room together with Emihan and Aphelia, who gained consciousness shortly after Chaflar returned to where May and the others hid. When they reached the room, Aphelia immediately apologized for the blunder that happened because of her. However, it was not really necessary since it was not her fault at all. Still, it did not make her cheer up and just promised her loyalty until the end of her life. Sure enough, that was an absurd kind of repentance for the small blunder that could not be helped, but she was so adamant about it. After that, the military had been considerate leaving him alone and allowing him to rest. The other people were not though. The news of him and the battle he had with the flame demon circulated fast within the settlement. It was because everyone in the settlement wanted to know the things that happened in the industrial area and someone leaked the story. The military tried to cover it up, but unfortunately, it did not work on the people who had eyes in the military. That was why an hour after Mark arrived at the hotel suite until the sunset, a lot of unwanted visitors came to greet him. Of course, he did not and would not care about them, and as such, he just sent a soldier to push them away. Unfortunately, it would surely not be the end of them coming to try to meet him. At night, Mark snuck out with May, Chaflar, Emihan and Aphelia. It was to retrieve their things that were buried in the ruins of the church. The fragile things were done for. Good enough, even though the case was dented, the package he had to deliver remained intact inside due to the careful packaging it had inside. Unfortunately, the Alpha was found dead. It seemed that its head was crushed by large debris that had fallen from the roof of the church. The night after that was rather peaceful. Well, the double bed was rather crowded though. Mark looked at the bed where 3 little girls were still asleep along with the blood children around them. Ivy, however, was sleeping on the side table though. Although it looked bad with her being isolated like that, but it could not be helped. Her body was made of poisonous blood. Should I wake them up? May suggested, which Mark shook his head to. Just let them sleep. It's not like there are urgent things to do. Mark emptied his cup. By the way, I'm going out later. To deliver the package? Right, want to come with me? Mark asked, and surprisingly, May shook her head. I'll just stay. Well, this is unusual, Mark said. Is there something wrong? My family's residence is near the general's office, so it's very likely that we will run into them. I rather not see them. I see, Mark patted her head. Okay, you stay here with the children. Yes. When noon came, Mark left the hotel carrying 2 metal suitcases. This time, he was going to traverse the settlement like a normal person, so he was escorted by soldiers to a vehicle which drove off towards the military grounds west of the hotel. They arrived shortly, and Mark went out of the vehicle in front of a former call center building. Before Mark could enter the building with his guards and guide, however, he suddenly turned his head on the other side of the road. There, he saw 2 people who seemed to be walking towards the same building he was going to enter. Mayer was right. It's good that she didn't come, Mark murmured before turning and entering the building. After arriving at the 3rd floor, the soldier that served as Mark's guide knocked on a certain door. General, he's here, the soldier that guided Mark called out. Let him in. A middle-aged voice replied to the knock. Instead of immediately entering, however, Mark sighed. When he entered, it was not just the general inside the office. It was expected that Captain De La Rosa and Major Lopez would be present, but it was not just the 2. There were another 2 males and 3 females in the office. Seeing that Mark was panning his eyes towards the people inside the office, the general spoke first. My apologies. I know this should be a formal meeting, but there are people here that had requests to meet you. Mark just shrugged his shoulders, as if he could do anything. Inside the room were the general's 3 children, Raphael, Angeline and Gabriel. Together with them were Paula and an older woman that had the same fluctuation as Paula, obviously indicating that she was Paula's mother. You don't have to be stiff. The woman spoke. I'm Alicia, Paula's mother. I'm just here to personally thank you for helping my daughter before. If not for you, she might not be here standing with me. Alicia approached Mark and offered a handshake. With a sigh, Mark accepted the handshake. It seems that you dislike handshakes. Alicia spoke, which made Mark look straight at her. So, you can tell lies just by gestures. You're stronger than your daughter. My. It's just from experience. Besides, my daughter is still young. If you like, I can give her to you. Mom. She tried to joke, which made Paula beet red in embarrassment. No thanks. Mark replied without a change in his expression, which made Alicia sigh. There's no lie in that. Is my daughter not attractive enough? Alicia continued as she was being pulled away by her daughter. On the other hand, the 3 military officers could only shrug their shoulders seeing Alicia's antics. It looked like they were already used to her weirdness. To the side, Angeline was just staring at Mark as if trying to remember something. As she did not speak, Mark just ignored her and went straight to business. Here's the packages General Faustino told me to deliver. After they received the 2 mail cases, the 3 officers checked the contents and skimmed over the papers. We confirmed it. The contents were the same as what is said with the report we received. There, the general placed another 2 cases on the table in front of Mark. We would like you to deliver this when you return there. Is it possible? We already knew that you built your own base in Quezon, and for sure, you will be returning there with your group. I don't mind, but what about the payment? We knew that you will say that. The general placed another case on the table. We heard that you were interested with the military research and prepared a copy of ours. Aside from that, we will prepare seeds of the so-called energy rice Professor Sandoval developed. Are those enough? Mark took the case and opened it. There, he saw stacks of papers which showed the findings of the military about the infected in the area, along with the profiles of each type of infected the military encountered. Seeing some of the names, Mark turned his head towards the general. Z-type A1. Biter. Z-type B1. Eater. It seems like you guys adopted my naming pattern. Yes. The general nodded. Miss Odalina gave us the phone with the application you programmed containing information of the infected your group encountered in Bacoor, Cavite. Since it was easier for our soldiers to remember these kinds names, we decided to implement them along with the classification name given by our scientists. Hearing that, Mark nodded. It seemed that he also had a hand with some of the things that happened in the military in this settlement. All right, this is enough along with the seeds. We need those in the base we are developing. Mark was satisfied with the papers he had received and carefully returned the research into the case. Now, there is another thing you wanted to ask me, right? Haha. It seems we can't hide it. The general laughed. Actually, it was not serious but just a personal question. General Perez looked straight at Mark. Are you the one that cured my daughter? Day 55 to 12:32 p.m. General's Office, North District, Bay City Settlement, Pasay City, Metro Manila. So, is this really the reason why these mother and daughter are here? Mark said as it was the first thing that entered his mind after hearing this question. He looked at Paula and Alicia that were both shaking their heads though. Please, don't misunderstand. The general said with a serious expression. Even if they are not here, I will still ask the same question. I just want to know it. Feeling the emotional fluctuation of the general, Mark knew that he's saying the truth. Furthermore, not only the general was taking the question seriously but also his children. Looking back at the general, Mark spoke. Well, if no one really asked about it, I won't say anything, but since you asked, I don't really have to hide it either. Then it's true that you saved me. Angeline spoke from the side which Mark nodded to. That was right. Although it was somewhat inconvenient, Mark really had no reason to hide it. Even if he had the ability like this to help people with the same state as Angeline, no one could force him to do so if he did not want to. Another thing was that the general's family could owe him because of this. The general was rather relieved that Mark did not deny it. Still, what gave it away? I don't think that your Angeline suddenly recovering would lead towards me. Maybe, she just woke up on her own. Mark asked. Actually, there are a few reasons, but most of them could only bring us to speculations. Even though Angeline's body was in a stable state, none of the doctors could say whether she will be able to wake up in the future. That was why her recovery was too abrupt. Also that. General answered Mark's question and turned to Angeline. There, Angeline's arm turned black-colored, which indicated that she activated her ability. My daughter suddenly turned into a mutator with an ability Lopez and De La Rosa had seen before. The member of the syndicate called Black Devil. Furthermore, it is known that you handled his body at that time. If that was just it, we wouldn't have suspected you and think that it is just a coincidence, but the report from the settlement in Quezon about you came. General Perez placed a folder in the table which Mark opened. There, his updated profile along with a picture that was probably taken from a screenshot of the drone during the battle with Horde controlled by the infected insect. Among the unconfirmed information, however, one of the things listed would surely alert anyone. It was the ability to usurp a mutator's ability and give it to someone else, whether it was human or animal. There, even the reasons for the speculation were listed. Along the lines, even Drake's and Chaffler's names were listed. So, it's because of this. Seriously, can't I have some privacy from you soldiers? Mark complained as he returned the folder. My apologies, but it's also our job to monitor people like you. Although to tell the truth, I want to leave you alone with your business. Sir Faustino is also the same. That is why this new report is not circulated to other settlements but was only known by us here in this room. Is that so? It seems like I made a blunder. I should have used another ability to give her. Mark said with a bit of relief. Now that you confirmed that I can do what is said in this report, what's next? With how the things proceeded here, Mark expected that the general might ask him for something. And as he expected, there was. What he did not expect was what the general would ask of him. Actually, I want to ask for your aid once more. The general spoke in a tone not as the highest person in this settlement but as someone who seemed to be begging in the streets. You want me to strengthen people and turn them to mutators? Mark spoke with a little glare. Although creating a single, physical crystal only needed 2 mutagen stones, it would not come cheap as he was the only person who could do this. To Mark's surprise, the general shook his head. Although it really is a good opportunity to ask something like that, I'm sure we won't have anything to give in exchange. Also, what I am going to ask isn't for the military. I'm not speaking as a soldier right now, but as a husband who wanted to see his wife to live like a living person. This was a surprise. Mark could tell that all the people inside this room knew of this. Your wife? Yes. The general nodded. Are you free after this? I want to take you to see her. I didn't say that I will agree to help you. I don't even know if I can help her. I know. Even if you don't agree, I just want her to meet the person that saved our daughter. Is that fine? Hearing that, Mark started to contemplate. It was then that General Perez remembered something. Oh, right. My wife is currently confined in the laboratory. I just remembered that Isaac wanted to meet you. That scientist. Mark frowned. I heard that he had been annoying Mayor and my friends. Is it about Jeanette again? Or he had his eyes on the body of that demon now? I don't know. He just said that he had something to talk to you about and he looked serious. Is that so? Mark tapped his chin and finally decided. All right, I'll go. Are we going now? Hearing him agree lightened the complexion of the general and his children. We'll go immediately. General Perez stood from his seat. De La Rosa, Lopez, I'll leave the office to you too. There are no problems with me. Captain De La Rosa nodded. Just go. You deserve a break to spend with your family, though you have to come back immediately after your private business. Major Lopez revealed a rare smile in his stern-looking face. There, everyone in the room went out to prepare to leave. The captain and the major also went out to accompany everyone until the doors of the building. While walking, Mark could tell that just his agreement to meet the said wife of General Perez made all the members of their family feel better. This was a family of good people, a family that viewed gratitude and debt rather highly. Since they were in debt to him in many ways, they wanted to show their sincerity even in the smallest things they did. They were all ready to go out of the building. However, the general was stopped at the lobby. As they said, it was easier to encounter people who you did not want to meet. General, you're going out? We want to talk to you about something. A stout man together with a younger dandy-looking man stopped the general and spoke without putting his eyes on the people around the general. Mark, however, felt rather displeased. These two people were Xiao Jin and Xiao Hao, Mei's father and older brother. Finally, Xiao Jin noticed that there were people together with the general. Seeing Paula and Alicia though, his expression turned into a wary one for a split second before hiding it. Ah, you were with your children and Miss and Mrs. Clarence. Pardon me if I failed to greet all of you properly, also to Captain De La Rosa and Major Lopez. Then, Xiao Jin's eyes fell on Mark. This person is? General Perez was rather troubled by the question. As Mei had already shared her experiences with her family to Angeline and Paula, it already reached the general. The worst thing now was that the person Xiao Jin was asking about was the current partner of his daughter. Mark, on the other hand, felt a bit of relief. His name and deed yesterday might have spread to everyone in this settlement, but no one actually saw his face aside from the soldiers. It was also the effect of not agreeing to meet anyone yesterday. As such, to the general's predicament, please don't mind me. I'm just a courier. Mark smiled rather amicably, which made Paula, Alicia and Angeline feel squeamish. Angeline and Paula had interacted with Mark before and he was mostly stern-faced and would only smile in front of May or Abigail. Even so, his smile would give him a natural atmosphere. This time, however, it was obvious that he was faking it. Alicia, on the other hand, could tell that Mark's smile and gestures were total lies. She could not help but feel a little cold on her back since she could feel the hidden killing intent behind that smile. Hearing that Mark was just a courier, Xiao Jin immediately lost interest and did not put Mark in his eyes anymore and continued to speak to General Perez. Seeing what happened, Mark turned to Captain De La Rosa and Major Lopez. I'll be waiting outside, and he proceeded to walk out of the building. The general was troubled in this circumstance, as with the status of the Xiao family in the settlement was not something he could just ignore either. In the end, he could only gesture Angeline to run after Mark. As such, Angeline and Paula ran off to follow him. Aside from the two girls, Captain Della Rosa also followed. As Xiao Hao was concentrated on speaking with the general, he did not notice the two girls leaving, but Xiao Jin saw it all. It made the man think as to why it looked like that General Perez and his family seemed to value a mere courier. Asterisk asterisk. Why didn't you introduce yourself to May's father and brother? Angeline asked in curiosity. Ange, you're behaving badly again. Paula reprimanded. People had different circumstances. Remember that May want to separate from her family. I know. But isn't it better if they knew who they will face if they still forced her to come back? Finally, Mark replied. It's not that simple. Their status here in the settlement isn't low at all, and they can make it more difficult for everyone here. It includes your father. Since they didn't know who I am, they won't be able to try and measure me. They will be cautious to make forceful move over anyone. Why? Wouldn't they be afraid of you? The thing that happened yesterday, everyone knew of it already. Angeline asked in confusion. Knowing didn't mean believing it. Mark replied as he leaned his back at the wall of the building. Aside from the soldiers and a very small group of people, no one else witnessed what really happened. Since I didn't entertain those people that tried to meet me yesterday, they will start to think that I am just a fabrication of the military to put people in control for a while. After all, the whole settlement right now is very unstable. That's Ange, Mark is right. You know that aside from Senator Estrada, there are others that are eyeing your father's position. The three continued to chat with Captain Della Rosa serving as their guard at the side. Soon, the Xiao father and son walked out of the building with rather serious faces. They saw the three talking near the entrance but just glanced at them before the two left straight home. It did not take long and the general together with his sons, Alicia and Major Lopez also came out. This time, there was a rather heavy atmosphere around them. Dad. What did talk to you about? Why do you look so serious? Angeline hurried to ask her father, however, he turned to Mark first before replying. Let's get into the car first. I'll tell it on the way. The general's personal armored car arrived soon and everyone boarded it. From the general's look at that time, it seemed that what those two talked to General about had something to do with him or May. Day 55 to 1:03 p.m. J.W. Diokno Boulevard, North District, Bay City Settlement, Pasay City, Metro Manila. Two armored vehicles left the military office following north of the main road just in front of one of the most prestigious malls in the Philippines, the Asian Mall. Inside the first vehicle, which was the general's personal vehicle, there was Mark, General Miguel Perez and his children with Rafael as the driver. On the second vehicle, Alicia drove with her daughter. Now, Dad, what is that about? Angeline asked. In response to that question, however, General Perez turned to Mark. Those two came to me to arrange a meeting with you in May. So, what do they want now? Mark felt annoyed. Before, they wanted Mayor to return to them after she gained enough status here in Bay City. Are they changing their plans now? That's right. Their goals are too obvious to anyone in the know. At first, when they learned that May arrived here safely, their approach to take her back was rather aggressive, but their motivation isn't there. As time had passed by, however, and May showed great promise together with her group, their approach became less aggressive but more desperate. Unfortunately for them, Mayor doesn't want to be their pawn anymore. That is right. The general nodded. The Xiao family is an ambitious one. Although they don't vie the position of the military in Bay City, they wanted to have the same prestige and power. If they have May and her group who was recognized by the people in Bay City, it is very likely that they would be able to recruit more people and open an alliance with other well-known families and individuals here in Bay City. However, they don't have enough strength to force her to return. General Perez faced Mark with a mysterious expression. Do you want to know their plans before? Don't try to be mysterious, just say it. They learned that her previous fiancé didn't make it, so they wanted to arrange another. Do you know Raver Guevara? That so-called genius businessman? That dandy guy in Estrada's alliance? Oh, of course you will him. You already dealt with his men, right? That is their plan at first, but they had to cancel it when Team Fairy, started to participate in a lot of activities of the military and the defense forces of the settlement. General Perez leaned on his seat and faced forward. Now, they wanted me to arrange a meeting between you two and their family. Most likely to tie you up to their side. They already knew about the relationship between you and May, and hearing about what happened yesterday made it worse. So, that meeting is somewhat like a marriage interview, Mark said with a sigh. They wanted to know if the rumors about me are true. If not, they will do their best to separate me and May, but if it's true, they will acknowledge our relationship and tie me up to their family. Seriously, her family is troublesome. Unfortunately, that's how business families work. If you are in a higher society, these kinds of things are common. Well, we really don't need to worry about it, Mark said with a calm tone. It's not like they can do anything after we left. That's also true. Finally, the people in the car went silent. That should be the end of the conversation, since the Shao family would really not be able to do anything after Mark left with May and the others. They had no capability to traverse several cities filled with infected just to chase after him. After that, the military will handle the aftermath. Say, Mark. Angeline suddenly spoke. Why don't you just kill them? You don't even bat an eyelid when killing others. It's not like they can put up a fight against you, right? Once they're gone, the problems involving them will vanish too. Hearing that question, everyone in the vehicle turned to her with strange expressions. Did you come from a family of criminals than a soldier's family, sister? Gabriel asked while scratching his head. Even General Perez and Raphael had troubled faces. On contrary, Mark just looked at her with a faint smile. You are right. I don't really mind killing them, but if possible, I rather not. Why? Mayor don't want to return to them and hated them, but not to the point of wanting them to die. They might not be good people, but they are still her family. Mark then sighed. I would rather just leave them alive than be called the murderer of my wife's family, right? Oh. Angeline finally went quiet. She somewhat understood what he was saying. However, it seemed that she was still not finished, as she spoke again after just half a minute when the things she heard sunk into her mind. Say, you really called May your wife, huh? Why, is there something wrong with it? Of course there is, Angeline bellowed. None of you two ever confessed to each other at all. We heard it from May yesterday. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. It did not take too long and they already arrived at the laboratory. Because of that, Angeline's banter was cut short, with Mark not being able to answer. Since the conversation was getting awkward, Gabriel had to cover his older sister's mouth to make her stop. When they all parked the vehicles and went out, what's wrong with you all? Alicia asked as she noticed the strange atmosphere from the other group. Mark looked fine, but it seemed that the males of the Perez family felt awkward because of the only girl in their family. On the other hand, Mark was also in deep thought. What Angeline said was true after all. It was the problem of a person who never had any relationship with the opposite gender before. Leaving the awkward atmosphere outside, they entered the laboratory building. They were given passes to wear on their necks to indicate that they were guests here. The general was not an exception to this rule. This was how strict the laboratory rules were. Unless a scientist personally led the people inside, everyone needed to wear these passes. In the reception, General Perez told the personnel to tell Professor Isaac County that he arrived and they will be going to the hospital area of the laboratory. It was only then that they left deeper into the building where the intensive care unit was located. Mark could clearly remember this place, as it was near the area where Angeline was confined before, when she was still in her coma. This time, they were going towards a different area where the more serious patients were located. Like how it was with Angeline's room before, there were soldiers guarding outside. The two soldiers saluted as the general led everyone inside. Inside the room, the beeping of the apparatus could be heard. Mark looked at the female patient on the bed, which almost looked like Angeline but just older and had blonde hair. Angelise, we're here. The general spoke as he held the hand of the woman. Of course, there was no response from her. Despite that, the members of the family spoke to her as if she was awake. They introduced Mark to her as their family's benefactor. Although it was not all false, it made Mark feel awkward. Yet, he could not help but feel a little bit of envy seeing how close this family in front of them was. However, Mark felt strange as he looked at the woman's appearance. Asterisk 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 Angelis Lundberg Perez was her name. Unfortunately, she was in a coma for 4 years already and was just kept alive using life support devices. As a soldier in high position, not only the general's life was always in danger but also his family's members. That was proven when his wife was attacked by 2 people who infiltrated his house when he was away and his children were at school. Everyone in the house present at that time was shot. Among them was the general's wife. It was a miracle that she managed to survive that incident, although she ended up in a comatose state since then. Still, what happened to her was the heaviest weight their family carried until today. Asterisk asterisk. Is she a foreigner? Mark could not help but ask. Aside from the blonde hair the woman had, her face, despite being thin due to her state, still looked like of European descent. Hearing the question, General Perez smiled. That is right. She came from Sweden. Back then, she came here to Philippines as a tourist but got caught in the middle of a terrorism activity in Mindanao. It was way before I became a general. I got dispatched with the squad that is tasked to retrieve the kidnapped tourists at that time and I ended up meeting her. She is a brave woman. Instead of succumbing to fear after being kidnapped, she looked for an opportunity and managed to escape. I saw her running away in the middle on the forest with her bruised legs and feet from running too far. Who would think that the woman that I coincidentally met in the woods during her escape would become my wife and the mother of my children? The general looked at the woman with a smile as he reminisced the past. Mark shrugged his shoulders. This man in front of him battled terrorists when he was in a younger age. He on the other hand was shut inside his home watching anime and playing video games. The gap was too large. Still, looking at the woman, Mark felt really strange. As he racked his memories, a strange coincidence came about. He could not believe it. This woman called Angelis had a total resemblance to Fried's deceased mother. It might just be a coincidence, but it was really strange. Mark, are you okay? Paula tapped his shoulder as he was staring straight at Angeline's mother. I'm fine. Mark replied. However, his eyes are still glued to the woman on the bed. It made the others inside the room feel strange. Finally, Mark turned to the general. Do you know anything about her ancestry? That was a strange question coming from Mark, but as they were the ones who wanted to ask for his help, the general could only answer what he knew. Unfortunately, no, the general shook his head. Angelis is an orphan who was raised by her foster parents. She never knew who her real parents were or if she had any other blood-related relatives left. It was a disappointing answer, still, it gave him the reason. Can all of you leave the room? Mark said. Why? Angeline asked as his meaning did not sink in with anyone here. I can't let anyone just see my methods. It's better if I'm the only one here. Mark spoke again. However, the general realized his meaning this time. Are you saying, I'll try what I can do but don't count too much on it? Me what? Just get out already. Do you want my help or not? Yes, we want it. Quick, everyone empty the room. The general was obviously delighted to Mark's decision despite feeling strange as to why Mark asked those questions and suddenly told them that he would try to help them. Nevertheless, this was what he wanted to hear the most. Although Mark said not to count on it too much, in the least, the possibility was not zero. Mark watched the others go out of the room, leaving him inside. Seriously, they are too desperate. What if I'm here to harm her? Tisk, tisk. He murmured. Yet, although he said that, he had no plans to do any harm to her. Rather, he was curious. Once she woke up, he would surely ask for her lineage if she knew anything about it. Furthermore, it would not be hard to do it. She might have been in coma for years already, but her consciousness did not deteriorate too much. It was just in a state of deep sleep. He just needed to stimulate her consciousness and she would be waking up soon. Day 55 to 2:11 p.m. ICU, hospital area, military laboratories, North District, Bay City Settlement, Pasay City, Metro Manila. It had been an hour after Mark chased everyone out of the patient's room. The general were outside waiting restlessly with his children. Even the two guards outside were confused as to why the general and his children were outside instead of staying inside the room. "Oh, Miguel, what are you doing outside your wife's room?" A familiar voice was heard by the general, who was staring at the windows on that door of the room that was shrouded with black smoke. When the members of the Perez family turned towards the source of the voice, they saw three people. They were Professor Isaac Coe and his foster children, which also served as his assistants, Nia and Alan. None of the general and his children even noticed the three people approach due to their attention directed towards the door. "Isaac, you finally arrived. Sorry I got delayed. We are in the middle of an experiment. You said that Sir Mark is with you. Where is he and why are you all outside of your wife's room?" It was then the professor's shoulder was tapped and he saw Nia pointing at the window shrouded in darkness. That black smoke at the window was rather familiar. "Is he inside?" "That's right. I see. You managed to convince him to help. Should I say congratulations?" "Don't jinx it, you idiot." Banter between the general and professor started. It was quite childish of the two, but in the least, the anxiety the general felt was lessened. Asterisk 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 inside the room. Mark had his eyes closed while his right hand glowing with milky white light rested on the forehead of Angelis. He was concentrating hard on channeling his mental energy on the woman in order to wake her up. However, what he considered to be an easy task was not as easy as it seemed. While he was right that she could wake up after her sleeping consciousness was stimulated like how he had done with Iola and Angeline, he found out that the current state of Angelis's consciousness was in a complicated situation. Her state was hard to explain. The most fitting and closest explanation was that her soul was deeply asleep in the deepest parts of her subconscious. It became harder for Mark's mental energy to reach those parts without affecting other unnecessary areas, and it took more energy than what he used for both Angeline and Iola combined. Luckily, he managed to absorb quite an amount from the flame demon, or else, the situation would be harder to deal with. There might be many possible reasons to this state, but the best reason he could come up with was because she had been in coma for a very long time. Her body had deteriorated already to the point that it would not be able to handle her consciousness anymore. At this point, it would just be a miracle for a person in her state to still manage to wake up. From what Mark was doing, he could feel a bit of response from her consciousness, but it was not enough for her to wake up at all. It would also be questionable if her body would be able to handle it if her consciousness suddenly returned, or the opposite could also happen where her consciousness would not be able to handle a very deteriorated body like her state right now. As such, two different colored crystals appeared floating in front of him. He decided to give up a pair of mental crystal and physical crystal, of course. Both of it were empty crystals since he had no plans to turn this woman into a mutator or a psychic. He just needed to strengthen her body and mind further in order to successfully wake her up. In the process, however, she would surely turn into an evolver. Soon, another hour passed. Mark could finally detect some movements on her eyes. However, it was still not finished. Angelis was already burning with fever, the main symptom of a person becoming an evolver. In her state, it would surely take at least another hour or two. 1.5 hours passed once more. Her fever was still raging and Mark still had to keep on aiding her with his mental energy. However, her body was already responding to pain as she started to finally move a bit due to the pain. However, Mark was mistaken. Asterisk asterisk asterisk, it was almost sundown. After 5 hours since Mark started, the burning fever started to go down and she looked better now. Although she was still thin looking, the deterioration of her body recovered enough. Finally, her eyes quivered. Slowly, very slowly, her eyes opened. When she opened her eyes, she was rather calm. She stared at the unfamiliar ceiling as if trying to remember something. That calmness, however, immediately faded and was replaced with panic when she started to recall her final memories after she was shot inside their house. She tried to scream, but of course, there were no words that came out. Instead, she released some hoarse screeches as her body had not fully recovered from her 4 years coma. From that 4 years that she had not spoken, her voice would not work properly now. Tears started to accumulate on the corner of her eyes as fear started to creep on her mind. It was then she felt a warm sensation on her head that started to calm her down. The sensation was very comfortable that it started to wash away her panic and fear. That was when she noticed the unfamiliar person that was caressing her hair gently. She could not speak, but her eyes that looked at him were surely asking for answers. "Don't worry. You're already safe." Mark spoke as gently as possible. "Actually, I want to ask you some questions, but you're still not in good shape. You just woke up, so it's not proper to do it. Well, it's not like you will be able to answer my questions." The first two sentences aside, what Mark said made the patient confused. "It's normal to be confused. No, just don't mind what I said. It will be better if your family is the ones to tell you the details. Let me call them." Mark then stood up from his chair and made his way outside. As it had been a long time, the general and his children became more and more anxious. However, none of them tried to knock on the door in fear that they would interrupt Mark's treatment. Professor Isaac had already returned since he still had to compile the data he just gathered in his previous experiment, but for some reason, Nia and Alan stayed behind. Finally, the shadow blocking the window vanished as if being siphoned to a certain direction. After that, the door opened, revealing Mark, who immediately went out of the door. "Mark, how is it?" the general anxiously asked. "Just enter," Mark said with a smile. "She's already waiting for you all. Just don't try to do anything that will make her unstable." Hearing that, the face of General Perez and his children lightened. The general grabbed Mark's shoulders. "Thank you. Thank you. Just look inside first before thanking me, all right?" Mark pushed the general away. Raphael, Gabriel and Angeline also expressed their gratitude before rushing into the room. After the members of the general's family entered the room, Mark's eyes fell on Nia and Alan, who was intently looking at him. "You two have business with me, right?" "Yes." The two nodded. "Did that girl I caught woke up already?" "She did. She was rather restless and was throwing a fit." Hearing that, Mark felt odd. "That's strange. I felt that she should be a kind of emotionless person." "All right, bring me to her room. We will talk there." "It's no problem." There, Nia and Alan led Mark towards another part of the hospital area. Mark handed Spera to the military for a hospital arrest since she was unconscious that time. Of course, Mark said that she would be under his protection and the military mess with her. Questioning her would be fine, but Mark had forbidden any kind of torture or forceful approach in gathering information from her. "Did the military send anyone to interrogate her?" he asked. "Yes, but it seemed that she's incooperative," Nia replied. "It has to be expected. The members of that organization are tight-lipped ones. The interrogator didn't try something funny, didn't he?" Fortunately, nothing of that sort happened. Soon, they arrived in front of the room. As expected, the security was tight as 4 soldiers guarded the room outside, and there was a one-sided mirror where the guards could observe what was happening inside the room. Normally, no one aside from assigned personnel could enter the room. Even Nia and Alan had no authorization to this. However, when the soldiers saw Mark, they saluted and let him enter with the two. It seemed that the guards knew him. "As I said, you people will not get anything from me. Either leave or just kill me." A rather emotional voice was heard the moment Mark stepped into the room. Mark felt a bit of surprise. Looking at the bed, Mark saw Spera lying on her side while facing the wall. As she did not hear any reply, she finally turned and saw who entered her room. "You," of course, she recognized Mark. Not by his face, however, but by her intuition. Even though her ability was already taken, as the host of that ability for 6 years, the strange sensation she could feel from Mark was still there, albeit weakened. Nevertheless, Spera became wary. "You are that one that fought the flame demon and caught me, right? What have you done to me? Why can't I use my powers anymore?" she forcefully asked with a bit of tears at the corner of her eyes. Is this really the same person from yesterday? Mark thought. He became interested in her since he felt that she was an emotionless person. However, the girl in front of him was the total opposite. Not only that she expressed her emotions outside without restraint, but her emotions were rather unstable and mixed. Don't worry. I'm here to explain those things you want to know. Mark then turned to Nia and Alan. Also to the two of you. Mark then waved his hand, scattering miasma on the wall where the one-sided mirror was installed. He also blocked the windows on the door and the security camera on the ceiling. Well, introductions first, I think. All of us had seen each other yesterday but had no opportunity to properly do so. Just call me Mark. Please don't mind me not telling my surname. Seriously, I hate to lead these kinds of things. I'm Nia County and this is Alan Company, foster children and assistants of Professor Isaac Company. Nia introduced herself and Alan, who stood beside her. And you? Mark looked at the girl sitting on the bed holding her legs on her arms. Spera. That is what everyone calls me. What about your real name? Mark pressed further. To his surprise, I don't have any. The feeling of dejection was written all over her face. Actually, she felt reluctant to introduce herself to the enemies, but for some reason, he could not disobey Mark as long as what he wanted would not inflict harm unto her. Then, Nia, Alan. You don't have to tell me your question. I already know about that strange emotion you two have towards me. This girl called Spera is the same. Hearing that, the three looked at each other in surprise, especially Spera, whose expression and emotions were strangely overflowing. I decided to talk here since you three had the same circumstances. Actually, all of us here inside this room had the same experience. As Mark finished that sentence, a marble-sized crystal magically appeared on Mark's hand. A crystal similar to this. 6 years ago. I'm sure, you three can still recall. Those words filled the three with further shock as they stared at the crystal on Mark's hand. Day 55 to 6:32 p.m. Surveillance cell, hospital area, military laboratory, North District, Bay City Settlement, Pasay City, Metro Manila. The three stood wide-eyed as they stared at the crystal floating above Mark's palm. Mark had asked them if they recalled anything about that crystal and an event that happened 6 years ago. Recall? They felt that Mark should be joking. Even if they wanted to forget, that would never ever happen. It was because that event Mark was talking about, it was the event that changed their lives for the better. Asterisk 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 Nia and Alan were siblings that both grew up in the streets. Since their only guardian, their grandmother, died, no one was left to take care of the two. In order to live, the two wandered the streets searching for anything that could fill their stomachs. They did everything from searching garbage bins for scraps that could be sold to junk shops to begging passers-by in order to eat. If it was that, it would still be fine. After all, they still had the small house that was left by their grandmother. One day after returning home, however, they found out that there were strangers in their home. They claimed that the house was theirs and mercilessly chased the siblings out. The two tried to fight. But as children, they were not able to do anything and were beaten instead. Since that day, the two started to sleep in the streets. And their hardships continued. Most street children would group up and claim territories to scavenge and beg while bullying those that unknowingly entered their territories and snatched their hard work. Unfortunately, the siblings were also at the receiving end of it, and sometimes, they ended up sleeping without eating a single crumb of bread. There were also cases where they would be chased off in the middle of the night since the owner of the place they decided to sleep at caught them. They did not know how long they spent in the streets anymore. It may be a year but could also be more than that. The two lost count as they were desperate enough just to find ways to fill their stomachs. One day, however, a sweep happened. People from the local government enacted the ordinance. The homeless were caught and the siblings were included. As children, Nia and Alan were brought unto the local social welfare department while the authorities waiting for any parent to show up to pick up the two. Unlike the other children that were caught that time, however, no one would come for the siblings. Because of that, they were sent at a rundown orphanage in the middle of nowhere. The orphanage was poor as the fund coming from the local government was lacking. The roof leaked every time it rained. The walls were filled with soot and the floors were badly maintained. Those conditions were still fine, but the orphanage was way over capacity compared to its size. The children were ill-behaved and those who were weaker would likely have less to eat. And the worst thing was that the only caretaker of the orphanage was not doing her job. She did not care about the state of the orphanage and would hit the children if they annoyed her. The only things she would do was to cook porridge that barely had any taste and make sure that the children would not get out after curfew. Aside from those, the children were left on their own. It was a very bad environment to live in for children. Due to the same reasons, no people came there in interest to adopt any of the children. From what the siblings heard, every children living in that orphanage would end up leaving after they were old enough to work. It meant that they would live in that place until they were of age. At that time, Nia was 14 and Alan was a year younger. In the least, they only had a few years to spend in that orphanage before they go back to the harsher society. 6 years, however, Nia and Alan saw 2 bright lights falling onto the backyard of the orphanage in the middle of the night. In curiosity, the 2 sneaked out of their room despite the curfew and went to the backyard. There, Nia and Alan saw the 2 floating crystals emitting bright light. It was beautiful that the 2 could not help but reach of one. After touching the crystals, however, the crystals turned into glowing dust and entered their bodies. They felt a very painful sensation in their heads as if something was trying to take over. The 2 wailed in pain and that was the last thing they knew before they fainted. The next thing they knew, they woke up in a hospital being guarded by soldiers. There, they met Professor Isaac County that later adopted the 2 and became their foster father. Since then, their lives turned better. They lived in a beautiful house, ate delicious food and were even homeschooled to catch up to the years they missed being out of school. Fortunately, their mental changes after they absorbed the crystals aided them in their studies. They did not only reach the level of studies of the others of the same age but surpassed them with flying colors. That was why the 2 became official assistants of the professor in their young ages. Now, Nia was 20 and Alan was 19, but the 2 were regarded as geniuses in the professor's field of study. It was all thanks to those crystals. Spera was not an orphan. She had a father and mother and probably, even siblings. Unfortunately, Spera came from a family of black market merchandise. She, her father, her mother, none of them were treated as people and were regarded as merchandise. Spera was born in a family of slaves. That was why. She was never given a name. Human trafficking and slavery, for the most parts of the world, these 2 things were illegal and were punishable by law. Everyone knew that slavery was abolished a very long time ago. However, that was only in the surface. Under that surface, the dark secrets were hidden. Human trafficking and slave trading was a very profitable business in this area. Not only actual transactions happened, but these kinds of things could also be accessed through internet for those that knew how to. Unluckily, Spera was born to be a part of this dark mess. When she was born, she was supposed to be sold to a couple that wanted a baby. However, she was too sickly to become merchandise and she was able to stay with her father and mother. At that time, their owners thought that it would need a miracle for her to survive her infancy. And the miracle occurred. She was able to survive. Nevertheless, she was born a weak child. Her arms were thin and her stature was small for her age. Even though she was already put up for sale, no one wanted her. And during each time that she was put up for sale, there was a sentence that was engraved into her mind. "We don't need someone like her." She often heard these words from the potential buyers. Every time she heard those words, even though she already submitted to her fate as a slave, she was still severely affected. She never noticed. Little by little, her emotions vanished. When she was 11 years old, her last sale was conducted. Finally, she was bought. It was because an old pedophile took interest in her younger-looking body. Even before the sale was finalized, he kept touching her in inappropriate places. She hated it, but as a slave, she could not do anything about it. Not only that she was trained just to obey orders, her weak physique disabled her to do anything. During her transport, however, it happened. Their vehicle was driving at a road beside a cliff at that time, since the place of business where she was bought was in a very secluded area. Something then crashed onto the vehicle she was riding on together with the old man that bought her. Immediately, it became a pandemonium. The windows of the car were broken and a large part of the left side of the car was dented. From the force of the crash, the old man could only scream as the car was thrown off from the road onto the cliff. It might be the end of me, but it was better than being a plaything. That was what came into her young mind at that time. She closed her eyes waiting for the impact. However, while the car was falling, a pint of light entered her eye, making her open them. She then saw a crystal glowing in front of her. Who knows what happened to her, but she grabbed the crystal by reflex. Bam! The vehicle crashed below the cliff and immediately caught fire. She did not know what happened that time since she lost consciousness after she grabbed the crystal. The next thing she knew, however, she was nowhere in the scene of the crash anymore. Spera could see the smoke from the fire and the cliff where the car fell, but it was about 1 kilometer or more away from her. Furthermore, it seemed that she had passed out for quite a while, as she could already see rescue personnel at the road above the cliff. That was when she knew that she gained a supernatural ability. She did not know why, but she knew what it was, how to use it, and the rules needed to follow to properly use the ability. Using the ability, the very first portal she created was connected to the cell where her mother and father were being held. She wanted to free them. Unfortunately, rather than glee, her mother and father saw her as a monster. "We don't need you. Just leave." That was the last word she heard from her father. From then on, she used her ability to live freely. As a wanderer, she had no way to earn money and used small portals to steal food from stores. However, it seemed that her frequent use of her ability caught the eyes of the members of the Ouroboros. Soon enough, she was scouted by robed people. Initially, she wanted to decline and flee, but a single sentence made her stay and join. "We need you in the organization." Since then, she became an outer member of the organization, following tasks where most of it were either rescue or transport missions which could make use of her ability. For the most part, however, she was free to do anything as long as it did not harm the organization and its goals. That was why she was able to reject a certain kind of job. It was to personally kill people. She did not mind if others in her team killed them, but she did not want to do this kind of thing herself. Her resolve was still not enough. Nevertheless, her fate was changed, and it was because of that crystal that appeared in the most crucial time possible. Asterisk asterisk. You three are that shocked? Mark panned his eyes at the three people around him. However, he could feel the turmoil inside their minds, which indicated how much that even impacted their lives. Well then, I think you three really remember. Mark smiled. As for the talk we will have here, it will regard to the futures of you three. What do you mean? And how did you know that we encountered those crystals? That is our greatest secret, also, that crystal. Nia spoke in a rather tensed tone. To that question. I already said it. We are all the same, right? I also got one 6 years ago. No, I got several actually. Mark looked at Nia. Another thing is that my circumstances are different from you three. You can say that I met the source of the crystals and he wanted me to retrieve them. That declaration made Nia and Alan step back with a tensed expression. Spera, on the other hand, had a look of realization. Shaking, she slowly stood up from her bed. She soon fell on her knees and hugged Mark's legs with her eyes filled with tears. No, please, return it to me, please, I'll do anything. She cried out loud. Day 55 to 6:37 p.m. Surveillance cell, hospital area, military laboratory, North District, Bay City Settlement, Pasay City, Metro Manila. Mark stared at Spera with a dumbfounded expression. This was the very first time in his whole life to see someone grovel on his feet. He could also tell that this was not an act. The girl hugging his feet was totally begging, as if he had taken her only way to live. Spera looked at Mark with her eyes filled with tears. She did not care what she looked like right now. The only thing that she wanted was to get her powers back, even if she had to pay her body for it. That was why. Heek, please, please, return it to me, Heek, I will do anything. If you want my body, I can give it to you. Just, Heek, please return it to me. It was uncomfortable, that was what Mark felt. Even Nia and Alan, who were wary towards Mark after his last sentence, also felt it. Luckily, Mark covered all possible ways for other people outside to see what was happening inside the room. It was because not matter how they would look at it, it looked like Mark made a child cry. Mark sighed. He leaned down and held Spara's shoulders and lifted her up. He noticed. She was very light, even for a girl who had a body that looked like 13 or 14, she was too light. It took no effort to pick her up by her shoulders and put her back onto her bed. This sensation made Mark ask in his mind if this girl was eating properly. Calm down, will you? Do you really think that will talk to all of you like this if I only need to unconditionally take those abilities back? If I do, then this meeting is unnecessary. I can just take the abilities by force and none of you can do anything about it. Mark then tapped his pockets before turning to Nia and Alan. You two have a hanky? I forgot mine. The two were confused. However, Nia still took out hers and handed it to Mark. There, they saw Mark carefully wiping Spara's tears like he was taking care of a child. Seriously, you cry too much. Just how old are you? Spara went silent. She was dumbfounded as she did not expect this kind of gesture from Mark. Still, since he asked a question, she answered it by reflex. I'm 17. Her declaration of her age gave Nia and Alan a surprise. Spara's current appearance totally concealed that fact. Mark, however, was not surprised. He could tell how old a person was from the fluctuation of their emotions, and he knew that she was older than how she looked like. He just asked that question as an expression, but this girl actually answered. Mark continued to wipe Spara's face without any change in his expression, and the latter just led him without any form of protest. She looked like a child that found the affection she wanted for a very long time. Her lack of defense made Mark smile inside. It will be easy to get her loyalty like this. It was true that Mark was interested when he noticed her lack of expression and emotions yesterday. However, that was not the true reason he left her alive. Even if her apathy took his interest, it was not enough for him to leave her alive as she was initially in the camp of the enemy. Nevertheless, Flam's turnover to his side made him realize that not all the enemies needed to be eliminated. Like some Sengoku-era video games, not all generals captured from the enemy needed to be killed. Sometimes, their talents would be useful to the player's camp, and what the player needed to watch out for was their potential betrayal, as they were originally enemies. And Spara fit that criterion. She was not just a simple ability user but a genius in Mark's view. The ability to create portals that would connect two different places was not an easy task even if the person had the ability to do so, especially since the ability was bound to a lot of rules. In fact, the previous owner of the ability, Morelful, was not as proficient in using this ability as Spara. First, the ability cost a large amount of energy for opening the portals. Morelful at her peak state could only cast either 3 long-distance portals or 9 short-distance portals in the span of a whole day. Furthermore, the delay in being able to open a portal ranged for at least 10 minutes to several hours depending on the distance of the previous portal. Next, opening a portal would cause a disturbance in space, causing it to be very unstable. Unless it was a very short-range portal, it needed full concentration until the portal was fully created. Any lapse in concentration would cause the portal to fail and waste the energy already spent to open it. Any kind of disturbance of energy in the surroundings could affect the portal and its creation. That was another reason why it was hard to use for Morelful. Still, as a sniper, she was able to make use of this ability as she was always at the back of the line away from the most disturbance and enabled her to concentrate using it. The last thing was that the user should have been to the destination of the portal before they would be able to open one. As for the last rule, there was nothing they could do about it as the user of the ability needed to grasp the aura of space the destination had before being able to open the portal. To the other reasons, however, they learned later that it was due to Morelful's lacking comprehension of laws of space. Unfortunately, it was already late when they managed to know about it. On Spara's case, however, it was different. The span that their group arrived and tried to leave was too short. Not only was that, but Spara managed to forcefully open a portal despite the disturbance created by the thick miasma he spread in the area. If it was Morelful, Mark knew that it would be impossible for her to do so. It meant that Spara was a capable one in using this ability that was really hard to grasp perfectly. In other terms, she was a genius. Mark did not want to let go of such capable person if possible. If not, however, he would not hesitate to end her immediately. Still, it seemed that it would go the way he wanted. Still, it was really strange that the apathetic girl yesterday became a very emotional one, although it made the job easier. With those things in mind, Mark finished wiping of her tears and sat on the only chair in the room, leaving Spera that looked disappointed. As I said, I won't take the abilities unconditionally. It was also by the request of that source. Do you all know? The abilities you had belonged to other people before. Those people were the greatest friends and allies of the source of the crystals. Hearing that, Nia and Alan were shaken. The abilities they had were actually owned by other people. And those people are? Nia asked. Unfortunately, they are already dead. Mark smiled bitterly. They all fought to death trying to save their home planet. A different planet. Are they aliens? This time, it was Alan who asked with interest. No, they are also humans. It's just they were taken by extraterrestrials to live in another planet. Mark looked at Alan. Also, don't ask too much. I won't tell everything since it is better for you not to know about it. Mark said those words with a serious expression. You said, you won't take our abilities unconditionally. Nia asked once more. That's right. As I said, those abilities came from the precious friends and comrades of the source. As such, that person did not want to see these abilities to be used for evil purposes. Fortunately, Nia and Alan, you two passed. The two was surprised. What do you mean? I can tell. You two aren't bad people. Besides, don't think I don't know that you two had been sneaking out food for the orphan children in the tent city. You two also stealthily joined in defending the settlement during attacks. I've been wandering around these past days monitoring the settlement, and I already knew about the two of you. It's just the time is not ripe for you two to meet me. You have been watching us. To some extent. Mark smirked. After all, I have a duty to do so. Then why didn't we feel you? It's impossible for us not to notice. Oh, you mean that strange feeling? Mark closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Now, can you feel it? The three in the room were dumbfounded. The strange sensation vanished. I just overused my abilities yesterday and caused that sensation. I can activate and deactivate it anytime I want. It's just I'm expecting to meet you two today that I left it on. No wonder. Nia smiled with relief. So, you will let me and Alan to keep these powers? I will, for now. Mark turned serious once more. If you two tried to misuse the abilities you have, I might appear to take those back. You two have to behave. Thank you, and you don't have to worry. Nia lowered her head. We will surely not misuse these powers we have. We still have to return the favor to Professor Isaac for adopting us and protect the settlement within the shadows. We don't want to become like those people that threw us into the streets. So, you two were street children before, huh? Yes. Professor Isaac adopted us after we gained these powers, and he never mistreated us. All right. You two should go. I think the professor is already looking for you two. He's already close by. I still have to talk with this immature girl here. Mark pointed at Spera, who was keeping quiet as she sat on her bed. Yes. Nia and Alan bowed their heads and went out of the room after Mark removed the miasma covering the door. After returning the cover on the door, Mark faced Spera. As for you, I have a proposition. Leave Ouroboros and join my team. You have talent and potential, so it won't be bad to recruit you. Are you willing? Mark stood up. By the way, for sure I'm already an enemy of that organization. If you join me, then you will also be their enemy. Spera was rather surprised by the invitation. Why? She voiced with disbelief. You said that you are the enemy of the organization. Then why do you want me? I am a member of that organization. I already said that you have talent and potential. Besides, the organization is my enemy, but it didn't mean that all the members of the organization are also my enemies. Let me ask you, do you want to kill me? I bet you didn't even try to kill anyone in your life. No, I don't want to kill you or other people. I don't have the courage or ability. Sparrow replied, looking down on the floor. Then, you are not an enemy of mine. Why can't I try to recruit you? Besides, you have no choice. If you want that ability back, you can only join my side. If not, don't worry, I won't kill you, but I won't return it either. Aren't you afraid that I will try to betray you? Sparrow asked as she looked up and stared straight towards Mark's eyes. No, I have measures for that. Also, I won't return that ability immediately. You must prove your loyalty first. So, what is your answer? Sparrow looked down once more as she contemplated hard. It was then that a hand landed on her head and ruffled her hair. All right, I won't rush you. I'll give you a whole night to decide. Also try to eat more. You're too light. After those joking words, the hand on her head vanished. She hurriedly raised her head to look at Mark, but she found no one else aside from her inside this lonely room. Day 55 to 7:10 p.m. Rooftop. Corporate's office building. Asian Mall, JW. Jono Boulevard. North District. Bay City Settlement. Pasay City, Metro Manila. It was one of the buildings northernmost of Asian Mall. The rooftop was filled with solar panels which powered the mall during emergencies even before the outbreak and was now being used to power a lot of facilities in the settlement. Normally at this time of the evening, no one would be here at all. However, a silhouette could be seen sitting on the northern edge of the rooftop and was staring at the opposite building, which was the current military laboratory. Of course, the silhouette belonged no other than Mark, who had just left the laboratory stealthily. It was really not necessary to do so, but he just did not want to get entangled and pestered by Professor Isaac, who wanted permission to examine many things that belonged to him. First was Jeanette, a docile infected. Next was the body of Garvlam. Third was Ephelia and Amihan. Fourth was Amy. And lastly, Chaflar. Although the professor did not really intended to do any harm and was just curious, he was still troublesome to deal with. As he watched the people below enter and exit the military laboratory, he was contemplating. Really, Freed, you gave me a very troublesome work. Mark, he murmured while sighing. If he was the one who could decide, he would just take Nia and Alan's abilities away. He could either give to anyone in his group, make the abilities his, or just store the crystals away and be done with it. If not, he could also recruit Nia and Alan to join him. That way, the abilities that Freed deemed precious would just be gathered in one place. Unfortunately, he could not do that. Doing the former would be breaking his promise to Freed to only take the abilities back from those who misuse them. It was also impossible for the latter to happen, as it was very less likely for the siblings to join him. Also, it's troublesome to pose like a good person. Speaking to Nia and Alan like he liked that they were good people made him cringe inside. Although the children the two were helping were pitiful, they had nothing to do with him. They were not part of his group either. However, he needed to make sure that the two would think that he hated evil people to avoid the very little chance that the two would misuse the abilities they got. Mark did not want to go back and forth just to monitor the two. People can change. That is why the task Freed gave him was very troublesome. Good people that you could meet today might become evil people in the future due to their experiences. There's nothing I can do about it, I guess. Mark scratched his head. I also left the general and the others without saying anything. Angeline and Paula might come pester us later like what they did yesterday. Geez, they didn't even give us enough rest. He then stood up. Nah, whatever, things that will happen no matter what. I just want to go back already. He was about to leave when he took another look at the entrance of the laboratory. There, he could see Professor Isaac, Nia and Alan, who seemed to be searching for him. Still, Freed, it's quite a karma. Mark smiled with ridicule. The inheritors of your ex-fiancé and best friend turned out to be blood-related siblings. They can never continue their romance that was cut too short, unless they wanted to betray their moral integrity. With that last murmur, bat wings grew out of Mark's back and he flew off under the shade of the night sky. Day 55 to 7:15 p.m. Military Residences, North District, Bay City Settlement, Pasay City, Metro Manila. Mark landed on the balcony of the room given to him on the highest floor of the southwest tower of the military residences. After hiding his wings, he was about to knock on the tinted glass sliding door, but before he was able to, he could only smile bitterly. Without him needing to do anything, the sliding door slid open, revealing May on the other side. Her hair was tied in a ponytail and she was wearing an apron while holding a spatula. From inside the room, he could smell the aroma of fried canned meat. Gerger. Welcome back. How is the day? She smiled sweetly and received Mark's gentle pat on her head. Okay. I'm home. Mark smiled. He was still not used to this feeling, but it was not bad. Just where did you learn that? You're behaving like a housewife. I saw it from your anime collection. Is it bad? She looked worried if she was not doing it correctly. Nah, it's fine. Also get back to the kitchen. What you are cooking will get burned. Okay. Mark shook his head with a smile as May scurried back to the improvised kitchen they set up this morning. Once May was already out of sight, several small voices could be heard as 3 girls and 2 sylphs entered the room. Papa. The 3 girls called out at the same time, rushing towards him on who would get the first hug. Of course, Abigail won while Iola came last. Seriously, be careful you 3. Mark gave each of them a welcome hug. Master. The 2 sylphs greeted. It seemed that at the span while he was out, they finally decided on what to call him. Still, Mark felt troubled why they chose to call him that. Is it Odal who suggested that? Mark asked. Yes. Amihan energetically answered. Odal told us that, my lord, was more used to address a master of a household, but master is way more than that. Unfortunately, Odal said that, your majesty, can't be used too since master is not a king of a kingdom. Ephelia replied dejectedly. Mark patted the 2 using his fingers. Geez, don't be dejected. I also told you before to change that since it's not appropriate. I may be Freed's inheritor, but I'm not Freed. Still, Odal seemed to have the dominance between you 3, huh? Yes. Humph. She's just bigger because of my current body. The 2 answered in the opposite manner. Amihan did not seem to mind and seemed to be not afraid of Odalina at all, while there was likely to be a competition between Ephelia and Odalina. By the way, where's Odal? Mark asked. Aunt Odal went to the trading area with Sieg and Odette. She said that we don't have enough seasonings anymore. They should be returning already. It was Iola who replied. The military trading area, it was where anyone could buy anything that the military had supply of. It ranged from food and clean water to medicine and clothes. Of course, most medicines were useless now since the virus and bacteria that caused common diseases were either extinct already or could not affect humans anymore due to mutagen. Weapons could also be bought here. And the currency. It was either the military merits gained by working in the settlement and participating in their missions, or the items could be exchanged with mutagen stone, which had become the main topic for research of the military. Well, she should have just told me before. I'm gone outside anyway. Master, that is not possible. Ephelia seriously replied. Please, let the servants do the work of servants. The stare of Ephelia made Mark smile bitterly. All right, I won't say that again. Mark sat on the bed and looked at the 3 girls. Dinner is not ready yet. What will we do? Hearing his enquiry, Abigail and Iola looked at each other. The 2 then ran out, leaving the confused Miracle behind. Mark was also confused as what the 2 were up to. It did not take long and the 2 returned carrying the familiar laptop he took out of Bacoor City Mall. Behind them, the blood children were following. Soon, on the bed, everyone could be seen watching a magical girl anime on the laptop. Even when Odalina returned with her children and dinner was ready, they all ate while watching. As Mark expected, Angeline and Paula came to crash the party by complaining to Mark as to why he left without saying anything. When sleep time came, Mark could not sleep. It was not because the large bed was crowded, but because he was thinking about something. My own family. Huh, he whispered. This is not bad at all. Day 56 to 1:23 a.m. Mount Caladang, General Nakar, Quezon. A temporary camp with several shelters could be seen with about 15 people living inside the camp. They were not just normal people, however. They wore hides of beasts they had slain as protection on their bodies. On their necks hanged necklaces made of claws and teeth of ferocious animals. Above their heads were crowns made of feathers of birds of prey. Their hands held spears and bows made from bones and sturdy wood. In one look, anyone could tell that they were not city folk. These people were tribesmen, very likely, those who were left of their tribe. Inside one of the shelters, which was positioned at the center of the camp. "Grandmother, are we really taking the right direction?" A boy about 11 wearing a tribal loincloth asked an old woman who was mediating. The old woman did not respond and her eyes were still closed. Due to that silence, the boy could only look at his grandmother's appearance. His grandmother was already old. Her arms and legs were thin, and while they were traveling, they needed to carry her. However, no one complained, as his grandmother was the only believed person to show them the direction of the salvation they needed. It was because she was the seer of their tribe. Unfortunately, the next seer, his sister, was still not of age to inherit the ability of their grandmother, and their mother had already passed away. It was already almost 2 months since they left their tribe in Baguio. That was then when the world became a mess. At the time they left, there were several families with them, which totaled to 70 people. Now, however, they people here in this temporary camp was the ones left. They experienced hardships and was almost wiped out several times. Nevertheless, they managed to make it through despite the casualties and sacrifices. Now, his grandmother said that they were already close but could not pinpoint the actual location due to a strange reason. That was why they chose to build this temporary camp as they searched for their destination. Yesterday, their tribesmen that went to search located a forest that was severely burned with a single tree left in the area near a large river. They also saw the remains of an airplane around the tree. South of that burned forest, they saw a small town. However, they decided against living there instead of this worn-down temporary camp. It was because the place was filled with stench of rotting dead bodies of animals, which would not be good for anyone's health. Hearing that news, however, they were surprised to his grandmother's response. She said that their savior was responsible for all those they have witnessed. It meant that they were getting closer and closer to their destination. Nevertheless, the people in their tribe were starting to get disheartened. After all, it had already been a long time. Their loved ones passed away and they were left struggling to death while chasing something that they did not know whether it existed or not. Anytime soon, their hearts would not be able to bear it anymore. That was what worried this young child with a mature mind. As the boy had those things in his mind, his silent grandmother finally spoke. "Relio, don't be discouraged. This is a trial for us. Those that can't handle it anymore can leave, and those that could persevere can stay. Only those that pass the trial can reach salvation. Although we are all one family, it did not mean that all of us deserve it.